All right, guys. So before we jump to solving absolute value inequalities, we need to talk about notation. So the notation that you're probably familiar with is this right here, which is the inequality notation. Then, of course, you have your number line, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We'll talk about it, though. This right here, the last one, this is the actual interval notation that we need to talk about. So let's just start with this first one here and talk about x is greater than 5. I think most students understand what that means, is any number that is greater than 5. On the number line, you start at 5, and then you just keep going all the way to the right. Now you see the open circle. You might have forgotten that if you have an open circle, that means you do not include this number. See, we don't have the line underneath it, so we're not including 5. It's just any number greater than 5. So we represent that in a number line with an open circle. Now let's look at interval notation. So think of interval notation as taking the number line and then just recreating the number line, but in this form. So it has to go from least to greatest, just like the number line. It goes from least to greatest. So if we have x is greater than 5, the smallest number we're starting with 5. Now notice I have these parentheses around the 5. So in interval notation, the parentheses means you're not including the number. And then if you have a bracket, means include the number. So this represents like your open circle for a number line and then your closed circle for a number line. So again, parentheses means not included in the number, and then the bracket means to include the number. So here, if x is greater than 5, we're starting at 5 but not including it and going all the way up forever to positive infinity. Now you'll never have brackets around positive or negative infinity because it's a theoretical number, so you really can't include that it's a theoretical number. So around infinity or negative infinity will always be parentheses. So let's look at the next one here. X is greater than or equal to 5. Well, you see the only difference in this right here is that the graph is shaded. So we have that closed in. So x is greater than or equal to 5. So instead of an open circle like we had here, we have a closed circle because we're including the 5. Well, how does that change the interval notation? You can see that now, instead of a parenthesis, we have a bracket because we're including the 5. So we're starting at 5, including it, going all the way up to infinity. So let's look at less than. So less than 5, we're not including it. So you'll be open circle on the 5, which is what we have here, and then we're going all the way to the left. That's how you represent it on a number line. Well, remember, we are representing the number line in interval notation. In essence, what we're doing is we're converting this to interval notation. So if you look at the graph, we're going all the way to the left, which is negative infinity. That's all the way to the left. So that's where we're starting. Remember, it has to go from least to greatest. So we're starting from negative infinity and going all the way up to 5. So that's what this tells us right here. So we're going from negative infinity, of course, it's parentheses because you can't include it, and it goes all the way up to 5. You cannot switch it. You cannot say 5 comma negative infinity. Students want to do that all the time. The left number has to be the smallest number. The right number has to be the largest number. If you remember that, it'll help you significantly. So looking at the next one, x is less than or equal to 5. The only difference, again, it's a closed circle now on the dot right here. It's closed. And then for the interval notation is exactly the same, except now we have a bracket on the 5 because the bar tells us to include the 5. So that's the only difference between those two. So let's look at the end statements. So here you have x is greater than 1 and it's less than 5. So on a number line that looks like this, you get open circles on the 1 and the 5 because we don't have the equal sign, and then it's going to meet in the middle because this is an end statement. The number has to be less than this number and greater than this number. So it looks like that on a number line. Well, the same thing for interval notation. We're going to convert it to interval notation here. So we're starting at 1, parenthesis, because we don't have the equal sign, and we're going all the way up to 5 and not including the 5, so it's parenthesis there. So now I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the next 3 examples, but you can see that the only difference between this example right here and the other three, is that you either have a closed circle, which means you're including the number, and then the parenthesis either switches to a bracket. That's the only difference. So it just depends on whether you're including the number or not. All right, so let's look at the bottom here about an OR statement. So an OR statement means that your number is either going to be less than this number or it's greater than that number. It can't be both. You can't have a number that's less than 1 and greater than 5. It's not possible. So your number line, when you're looking at it, you can see how these are separated. There is this space in between here because these numbers will not satisfy that inequality. So you have x is less than 1, open circle going to the left, and then x is greater than 5, open circle going to the right. So that's what these represent. Well, we have to do the same thing. We have to take this number line and convert it to interval notation. So I have two separate intervals. I have this interval right here, which basically means I'm going from negative infinity all the way up to 1, not including it. And then I have the next interval here, which starts at 5, not including it, and goes all the way up to infinity. And the way that you write that is you join them with this U, which is basically the union, which is saying it's OR. That's the only difference between the end statement there. We have to join them somehow, so we join them with a U. All right, so looking at the last three examples, you can see the only difference, again, has to do with either your closed circle, change the highlighter, closed circle because you're including the value with the equal sign, or it's going to be, you're switching it to a bracket because you're including that value. That's the only difference between those. So hopefully this will help you with interval notation because we're going to use interval notation a lot when we're writing our answers, especially when we're solving absolute value inequalities. So we will pick up with that in the next video.